Hello wonderful people, it's Wild here. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to create this charming pumpkin patch cottage. This cozy build is made up of 2 pumpkins, one large and one small, connected by a spacious underground area. So this build would make for a really cute addition to any creative world or a stylish but spacious survival base. The materials you'll need for this build are on your screen now. Keep in mind that it's always useful to have a few extra of each supply on hand. Here is the outline for the area we'll roughly be building in. Now for this pumpkin patch cottage, we're going to be having a basement that connects our 2 pumpkins, and you can kind of see where those are going to sit with the larger square and the smaller square. That way we can easily connect between the 2 and we have more space to decorate. So this outline is for the basement space, and then you'll need to allow about 5 blocks around the outside of all of this just to allow for some terraforming and the pumpkin patch creation. We're going to start this build by digging down 7 blocks throughout this whole outline and the interior space. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll dig this down all the way through here. If you're building in survival, make sure you keep aside some of this dirt because we'll be using it to fill back in a little bit. So we've got a little bit of digging to do, so let's clear out all of this space. Once you've finished all your digging, you'll be left with a hole that looks a bit like this. Now we can start adding in the floor for the basement. I'm going to begin by using a cheap block or just some dirt to fill in an edge like this. We don't need to put any flooring in here because this is where the walls are going to sit on top of, so we might as well save on resources. Although if you're building in creative, you could skip this step and bring the floors all the way out underneath the walls. So I'm just following along the outline created by the hole, making sure I go through this little corridor here. And now that I've done that, I can start filling in the floor. Now I'm going to create a checkerboard out of polished tuff and polished andesite blocks, but you can swap out these flooring for whatever you prefer. I just like the way these tiles look in a basement sort of space. I want to make sure that this flooring flows all throughout the 2 sort of rooms of my basement. So to ensure that this happens, I'm going to start in one corner and keep working on from there. If I went over to that corner and started filling in the floor, my checkerboard might not line up. So now I know that I need to put an andesite here and I can continue my pattern. With all the floor filled in, we can now start creating the walls. These are going to be 4 blocks high, so they're going to end up sitting 2 blocks below the top of the hole. And I'm going to be using a mixture of tough bricks, mossy cobblestone, mossy stone brick, and cracked stone bricks to create a texturized look. Now I like to kind of texturize as I go, placing in a mixture of my blocks and then taking a step back every now and then to make sure I like the way the texture's coming together. But you can always fill in the wall in just one of the supplies and then come back in to add in texture afterwards. It's really just about finding a technique that works for you. You might even do a mixture of this technique where you take a step back and make adjustments to your texture as you build. Let's see, I think I'm going to need some more tuff down here. We don't have nearly enough, so let's add that in. I like to stick to groups of 3 and then have some up on the diagonal like this. I think I might swap one of these blocks out like that. I think that looks nicer. And I'm just going to follow all the way around the outline, bending around the corners here and here, but sticking to that 4 block high height as I build. Remember that texture is different every time, so each section of your walls might look a little bit different and your walls are going to end up looking different to mine, and that's totally okay. If you are having trouble texturizing, you can always take a section of wall like this where you're happy with the texture, and then just repeat it around in panels and then go in and change a couple of the blocks just so that the repeat is not quite so obvious. If you're enjoying today's tutorial and would like to access some additional benefits like schematics and world downloads for this and all my other builds, as well as access to a multi-world server where you can build alongside me, check out my Patreon. I would love to have you join my community and I'd really appreciate your support. I've got all of my walls in now, let's have a look at them. You can always pause here and double check that you've got a similar sort of texture to mine if you would like. Having a look at these walls, and then onto the last two. But you can see how I've really just randomized the blocks as I go. Some walls have more of one block and some walls have less, and that's okay. Now that we've got the base walls in, we need to add in some details, and I'm going to start with some jack-o'-lanterns. I want to place a jack-o'-lantern so that its face, this bit here, is in towards the walls on the corners of this large square, and then in the corners of the smaller square as well. There we go, and we shouldn't be able to see any jack-o'-lantern faces. All good. Now in this larger square on these two walls, I'm going to count 3 blocks across and add in a jack-o'-lantern with the face facing out, 3 blocks across and 1 more, and that should leave another gap of 3. There we go. Now coming along this shorter wall, I'm going to count 3 blocks across, add in my jack-o'-lantern, and 3 blocks across and add in 1 more, and this is going to be sort of floating, it won't be against a wall. And coming along this way, along this longer wall, we'll do the same thing. 3 blocks, jack-o'-lantern, 3 blocks, jack-o'-lantern, and then for this last group of 3, I'm going to count 3 blocks across and this time rotate so the face is against a wall, like this. So when you're standing inside this largest room, you shouldn't be able to see faces on the 4 corner jack-o'-lanterns. Let's come into the smaller room now, and I'm going to add a jack-o'-lantern in the center of each of these walls facing outwards so you can see its face. On this longer wall, I'm going to need to count 3 blocks across to add 1 in, and on this shorter wall, I'll count 3 blocks across to add 1 in, and this is going to be floating in line with all of these jack-o'-lanterns still facing towards this room. Then for this final corner, I can count 3 blocks and 3 blocks and add in a jack-o'-lantern so its face is against the wall. So when you're standing in this little corridor, you shouldn't be able to see any faces looking in towards you on these jack-o'-lanterns. And when you're standing in this room, you should have 4 faces looking at you, and then the 4 corners won't have jack-o'-lantern faces. Now that we've got all of those in, which are going to provide some wonderful lighting as well, I'm going to add 3 spruce logs on top of each of these jack-o'-lanterns to create my posts. There we go. I'm also going to add in my ladder location to get up to the largest pumpkin. So in this large room, I'm going to come to this back corner and add 3 ladders going up. Just like this. Next, we need to start adding in some archways. So to do this, each of these 3 wide gaps is going to get 2 dark oak stairs and a dark oak trapdoor. And I'm going to do this all the way around the entirety of the basement. When it comes to these corridors, I'm going to add one going across the gap like this, and then inside the corridor gaps as well. So we'll have 4 of these archways going around the corridor. Once all the archways are in, especially when you look from above, you can see the division of the 2 rooms and the corridor space. I'm going to add another ladder in now in this smaller room against this post. I'm going to go the whole height up, and then I'm going to add in 2 spruce planks on top of this log to add 2 extra blocks onto this ladder like this. Then I'm going to grab some dark oak trapdoors and add one to the face of each of the other posts. Next, we're going to start filling in the roof. We're going to be using spruce planks for this, and we'll be sitting right on top of all of these walls. Keep in mind that this trapdoor is where we've got our ladder coming up. So I'm going to leave that gap free and then add in 2 of my spruce planks coming up behind here to add in 2 extra ladders. And then I can continue going around this outline and filling in. Once you've outlined a section, you can just fill in with planks like this. Alright, I'm filling in the last few bits of this flooring, or rather the roofing now. And you can see I'm just working around where I've got this ladder here, so I need to leave a blocks gap. Almost there. And there we go. So we've got 2 holes in this roof for where our ladders come up. And I'm just going to take a couple extra planks to create a sort of tube around where the ladder is. Just like that. Now I'm going to take some dirt and I'm going to fill in this last bit of the edge, and I'm only going up 1 block here. I want to leave this upper area clear because we're going to be placing in some podzol and other pumpkin patch material. Last but not least, before we continue on upstairs, I'm just going to come back down to this basement and find the center point of each of these rooms, so that's here, and hang down a lantern to make sure there's enough lighting in this center space. Let's go over to this smaller room and do the same thing. There we go. Now, to provide a little bit more separation between these 2 rooms, I'm going to grab some spruce trapdoors. I'm going to place 3 across the roof on either side like this, and flip those down, and then I'm going to place 3 coming underneath this archway. There we go. It's going to create the look of a little shelf. Then from the inside of this hallway, I'm going to hang down 3 banners by placing them onto these trapdoors. You'll need to hold crouch to do this. And it'll look like this. Let's head upstairs now, up our ladder, and we're going to start filling in all of this ground and creating this sort of pumpkin patch texture for our pumpkins to sit on. Now, because this is going to be a complex wiggly shape, I'm going to be breaking it down into sections, and we'll be needing some grass or dirt to fill in some of the gaps, podzol, and farmland. Now, if you're in survival, of course, you're just going to want to hoe any of the farmland blocks. We'll also need some water and some dark oak trapdoors. I'm going to start at this entry to the smaller section of our basement level. I'm going to begin with some podzol, and I'm going to start in this corner right here, and we're going to build 5 blocks down this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bring us right to the edge. Let's fill in this gap too. We're also going to need to dig out a little bit more space as we go. So I'm going to add 4 blocks next, going along this way. Then I'm going to add a block here, leave a gap, and add 1 more in. And then I'm going to have 1 coming diagonally down from this group of 2, just like this. Next, let's work towards the back of this entry. I'm going to count 5 blocks from this spruce plank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're breaking 1 extra block in here. And let's add 1 going diagonally this way. I'm going to fill these 2 sections in all the way up to connect into that podzol. Then I'm going to come down 1 layer and connect up to the podzol behind. There we go. I'm going to count 2 blocks down on the grass and add in 3 more, and that'll connect up so we have a group of 4 here. I'm going to have a podzol going diagonally this way, leaving a gap and adding in 1 more. So here's what we've got now. Let's keep working over towards this direction. I'm going to start by adding in another group of 6 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which will bring us to this corner here. Then I'm going to add in 4 blocks going this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to break 1 block and place an extra podzol in here. Let's complete this square coming down to where we've got our podzol and fill this in. Just like that. Alright, let's fill in this section now. I'm going to start by coming to this point or where we've got the spruce planks, and I'm going to build 5 blocks this way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'm going to come diagonally across to this edge like this, and I'm going to place 6 blocks going along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This should line up with where we've got our podzol finishing over there. And I'm going to fill in this whole section with podzol. Now we need to add a few more blocks coming off of this way. So I'm going to have one diagonally from here, leave a gap and add in 1 more. I'll count 2 blocks, add in 1 more and leave a gap and 1 coming diagonally out again. You can see how by breaking it into sections, it makes creating this complicated shape a bit easier. Let's continue on this way. I'm going to start by leaving a 1 block gap behind where we've just added in this diagonal podzol, and then I'm going to place in 2 like this. And I'm going to come all the way back to where we've got this edge, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. And we need to add in a few extra blocks coming this way so that we line up with the edge of this door. So that's 2 extra blocks back. Next up, we need to add in some extra pieces of podzol coming off at different angles. So I've got 1 block here, leaving a gap, and then diagonally back from that. Then I'm going to leave a gap, and then I'm going to place in a little L shape, kind of like this. Next up, we're going to be switching to some farmland. So to do this, we need to first add in some water. So I'm going to come to this little gap that we've left, which is going to be staying as grass, and then I'm going to count an additional 3 blocks across. 1, 2, 3. Behind this extra block, I need to add in either some dirt or farmland, and that's where I'm going to add my water in. I'm going to use a dark oak trapdoor just to cover that up as it blends in nicely with the farmland. Now I can switch back to my farmland blocks or my dirt, which I'll be hoeing, and I'm going to add an extra block coming this way. Then I'm going to have 2 more blocks coming towards here, and I'm going to fill in this gap here. Let's also have 1 coming diagonally this way. Next up, I'm going to add in 2 blocks coming to the side of the trapdoor, leaving this block as grass. And then let's work towards this side. We're going to have 2 blocks coming this way. I'm going to have 2 more blocks from here. And then we're going to have 1 coming up and 1 to the side. Next, let's work forward. I'm going to add 3 blocks from this trapdoor. 1, 2, 3. 2 blocks to this side, and then 1 diagonally coming forward. So we should be left with a little piece of grass in there as well. Let's work towards this side. I'm going to add in 2 more of my farmland, connecting us up to here. Then I'm going to have 1 diagonally coming forward, and then leave a gap and add 1 extra block in here. We're going to need to add in some more water soon, so I'm going to add in 2 more farmland, and this is where I'm going to add my water with my trapdoor on top. Let's come 2 blocks back, and now we need to fill in this corner, leaving 1 extra grass in here. From these 2 blocks, I'm going to come diagonally towards the section where we've got our larger build. And we need to fill in this section a bit more, so I'm going to create a little L. I'm going to have 1 diagonally coming up from here, and then I'll have 3 coming across this way. Now to fill in front of this trapdoor, I'm going to come 2 forward across these 3 blocks. Here's what we've got so far, and I'm going to let all of this farmland turn to that dark brown colour. One thing to keep in mind here is that if your shapes of the podzol and the farmland don't end up exactly the same as mine, that's totally okay. We just want to create a natural shape covering up over the top of where our basement is, and you've got to remember that in this sort of area here and this sort of area here, we're going to be having our large pumpkins, so we don't want to place farmland in those areas. Let's switch back to podzol for a little bit more building. I'm going to come back down to this corner where we last left off with the podzol, and I'm going to add in 2 more podzol here, leave a gap, and then 2 more. I'm going to have a row of 5, and then we're going to have 3 coming this way, leave a gap, and 1 more. Then we're going to have 3 rows of 5. For this next section, we're going to be blending the podzol in with this farmland. So I'm going to start by building 7 blocks across from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And let's build all the way down, and we're going to break these last couple of grass blocks so we can blend into the farmland. I'm also going to remove this grass block and this grass block here. Then I can fill in all of this remaining space with some podzol. Where we left those gaps earlier, I'm just going to add in some grass blocks here. Just like this. Let's continue the podzol over this way. So I'm going to start by building 7 blocks across from where we've last left off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then I'm going to come 2 blocks down from here and out on a diagonal. Coming back in this way, I'm going to add 3 blocks coming down. And I can fill in the remainder of this space with some grass. Then I'm going to add in 4 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, fill in the remainder with some grass. We're going to have another layer of 4 now. And once again, our grass. Now to fill in this section, we're going to have a layer of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to fill in one of these blocks with grass, and then I'm going to leave a gap and add in 1 more podzol. And then I'm just going to add in 6 more podzol here to fill in that space. So here's what we've got from above. Let's continue on. I'm going to come to the entry to the larger section of the basement, and I'm going to place in 5 podzol connecting up between this plank and the podzol behind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm then going to count 5 podzol off to this left side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I can go ahead and fill in this entire square. Let's continue on this way. I'm going to add 5 blocks from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that should bring us right to this edge. While we're at this edge, I'm going to add 2 more podzol coming down this way and then a diagonal. And then I'm going to come down to this section and add 1 more podzol into this space where we had some grass. Let's go ahead and fill in this whole area. Next up, we need to fill in this back section and extend it out a little bit. I'm going to start in this corner between these 2 planks, and I'm going to add in 4 blocks going backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm then going to leave a gap and add in 1 more podzol. Next, we're going to have a layer of 3. 1, 2, 3. 2 layers of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 2 layers of 3. For this next section, we're going to have a layer of 2, a layer of 3. We're going to have a layer of 4 next. 1, 2, 3, 4, and a diagonal coming up this way. Then we'll have a layer of 2, and finally I'll add 1 block in here and then a diagonal off that way. Next up, we're coming over to this last corner section. I'm going to start in the corner between these 2 planks and build 7 across this way with my podzol. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's have a podzol come diagonally down from here now. I'm going to leave a gap and then add in 6 podzol back this way. Then we're going to have 2 groups of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we'll have a layer of 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's going to connect up to this block we had in earlier. And I'm going to leave this block as grass and then add 5 more podzol back this way. Next up, let's switch to some farmland, and we're also going to need our water here. To add in the water, I'm going to find these 2 diagonal blocks and then come to the grass above here, and I'm going to count 3 grass blocks. On that 4th one is where I'm going to add my water and add in my trapdoor. Let's add in the farmland now. I'm going to have 1 block coming back from this trapdoor, and then I'm going to have farmland diagonally from here, and we'll connect it up on either side. I'm going to add an extra block of farmland and then fill in this section all between the podzol, just like this. Let's come this way now. I'm going to leave this as grass and add 2 farmland connecting up this way. Then I'm going to have 1 farmland adding it in here, and then I'm going to leave a gap here and add farmland all the way across like this. For the next layer, I'm going to come to this first farmland we added here, add 2 more blocks coming up this way, and fill that up all the way to the podzol. And then finally I'll count 2 blocks, and on these last 2 blocks I'll add in 2 more of my farmland. Here's how that shape should be looking, and let's let it turn to its dark farmland colour. There we go. On to the last section of podzol, which is to round off this corner section. I'm going to start at this plank here and build 4 blocks out with podzol. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see that connects up to that floating podzol block. I'm going to have 5 next, and that'll bring us to that edge. And then I'm going to be adding in 7 blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which should bring us 1 further than the edge. Next we'll have a layer of 6. There we go. Next up we're going to have a layer of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're coming down in a diagonal, followed by a layer of 3. For this next layer, I'm going to have 3 blocks, but I'm going to leave a grass here, so it's going to stick 1 block out like this. I'll have another layer of 3, and we're connecting up to the farmland now, and I'm going to finish off with a little L shape of podzol. Here's how my platform for my pumpkins is looking. Now I can begin creating the pumpkins, and I'm going to start on this smallest pumpkin towards the front right. We're going to be using orange concrete, wool and concrete powder, and I'm going to start by placing in a concrete powder on top of this here spruce plank where I've got my ladder coming up. Next up we're going to have a concrete, and then following along on the diagonal I'm going to have a wool and 2 more concrete. Then coming back this way we'll have a wool and a concrete powder. I'll have another concrete powder and then 2 wool. Now coming along on the straight again, I'm going to add in another concrete powder, then I'll have a concrete, and then I'm going to have a wool on a diagonal followed by 2 more concrete. I'm going to be leaving a gap in here, and then I'll add in 2 concrete powder on an angle like this, and then 2 wool, and that'll connect us back up to create a sort of pointy looking circle. Now we can start adding in the floor. So I'm going to be using a dark oak trapdoor above my ladder like this, and then I'll be using some stripped dark oak logs to create my flooring. Now I would like to create a chevron pattern, but you can just use these to create floorboards if you like, or you can do another pattern for your flooring. You can see how I've created the first chevron, and then I'll just follow on from here. So we've got some logs facing this direction now, and then I'll flip and face the other direction. Working always in groups of 2, or imagining that this one would continue out this way if I built the pattern on further. There we go, and here's what it'll look like. Let's go a layer up. I'm going to start with some orange wool off to the right hand side of the doorway, and I'm going to build 2 out like this. I'm going to use a temporary block to place in a concrete, and then I'm going to be working on this next side. So I'm going to be placing a wool on top of this block and then a concrete to fill in the corner. Continuing along, I'll add in another wool, followed by a concrete powder, followed by a concrete to stick off the edge. Next, I'll use a temporary block to place in another wool on this corner, and then we need to fill in this side. So I'll add a concrete powder on top of here and click on that to place in a concrete. I'll have another concrete on this side, and then I'm going to have 2 wool. Let's use a temporary block again for another concrete. Coming over to this side, I'm going to start with a wool and then my concrete on that. got another wool, a concrete powder, and a concrete. Now, if your shading ends up a little bit different, that's okay. You'll see we're trying to create the shape of a pumpkin curve as we're creating this semi-spherical shape. On this corner, I'm going to add in another wool, and then to finish it off, we're going to have a concrete powder beside the door, and then a concrete in this last gap. Let's remove any temporary blocks from this layer. For this next layer, I'm going to be using some orange stained glass, and I'll be placing 2 going up in the center of each of these 5 wide sides. Of course, I don't need to add in anywhere the doorway is, but I am going to place in a couple of temporary blocks just so I remember to leave that gap free for 2 blocks high. And we're going to be building straight on top of this circle here, so we won't need any more temporary blocks for this layer. I'm going to start off with a wool, then a concrete powder, and then 2 concrete coming back. Then we've got another wool, another concrete powder, and a concrete. Coming back this way, we've got a wool and 2 concrete. On the other side, we're going to have a wool and a concrete powder. Next up, we've got 2 concrete, followed by a wool. We've got a concrete powder and a concrete. And we've got in the corner another wool, followed by 2 more concrete. The next layer is going to be built just on top of this walls, so we can continue on as normal. I'm going to add in 2 orange wool, this time starting on top of the doorway. Then I'm going to have a concrete powder, followed by 3 orange concrete. On the other side of this window, we'll have a wool, and then we're going to have an orange concrete powder, and then 2 more concrete. On the other side of this window, we'll have a wool, a concrete powder, and 3 concrete. And on the other side of this window, we're going to have a wool, a concrete, and a concrete powder, followed by 2 more concrete to connect up. Now for the next layer, we're going to start curving in this pumpkin, so we need to allow us some extra blocks to build on top of. So I'm going to be using some of these spruce trapdoors, and I'm going to be placing 2 into each corner like this. When you click on them, they should flip downwards, and you should be able to place a block on top of these trapdoors. There we go. Let's start this layer right above the door with a concrete powder just like this. Then continuing around towards the right, we're going to have a wool. On top of this trapdoor, I'm going to add in a concrete powder. Then we're going to have a concrete right in the corner, and then a wool coming back onto this other trapdoor. Next up, we're going to have a concrete powder and 2 wool, or rather a concrete and 2 wool. Coming around this corner, we're just going to have 3 concrete like this. On top of this window, we're going to have a concrete, then a concrete powder, and then a wool. Coming back around this way, we're going to have a concrete powder, a concrete, and a wool again. On top of here, I'm going to have a concrete followed by 2 wool. For this corner, we've got 3 concrete. And then finally, for this last gap, I need to place in a concrete as well. Next up, we're going to be curving in even more, so we're going to need some more of these extra space trapdoors. So let's add them going all the way around this outline. Let's again start this layer in the center above where our doorway is. I'm going to start with a wool, and then a wool going to the side, and then I've got a concrete powder here. Next up, I'm going to come in and place in a concrete on top of this trapdoor, and then I'm going to jump back out, and I'm going to add in a wool here. Coming across this way, we've got a concrete, a wool, a concrete powder, and then a concrete again, and I'm going to place a concrete on top of this trapdoor and coming out this way as well. Let's move along this way. We're going to have a concrete, 2 wool, and then another concrete powder after that, and then coming back around this corner, we're going to have a concrete and a wool. Then we'll have a concrete, a wool, a concrete powder, and a concrete. Coming around, connecting up, we're going to have 2 more concrete, followed by 1 more concrete powder. And if we take a step back now, you can see the different segments of the pumpkin starting to come together. You can see these larger sections of the pumpkin orange curving around. And you can see the sections where we've got the lighter colour as well. Before we add in the very final layer, we're going to be placing in a few more spruce trapdoors. So not only am I going to fill in 1 layer deep, but I'm actually going to go 2 layers deep. So I'm just about filling in this whole section, and you can be particular about which way you place these trapdoors, or you can have them facing in different directions, but I just want to leave 1 gap free in the center. Just like that. Now to create the final layer of orange for this particular pumpkin. Let's start on this edge and work back in rows. We've got powder, wool, concrete. The next layer will have wool, concrete, powder. For the next layer, we're going to have wool, powder, concrete above this gap, concrete and wool. For the next layer, we're going to have powder, 3 concrete, and a wool. And for the last layer, we're going to have a concrete, a wool, and a concrete powder. So we've got the basic shape of our pumpkin, but to really make it look like a pumpkin, we need to add in a stalk. I'm going to be using oak wood for this, and it's the one that has the texture on all of the sides. I'm going to start by placing up 3 blocks in the center of my pumpkin, and you can check that it's in the center by counting 2 in from either side. I'm also going to add in a block coming forward and over towards the right hand side. Next up, we're going to have a block or 2 floating off towards the back. So I'm going to build up 2 blocks with a temporary block. Then I'm going to build up 2 higher with my oak wood, and you can see how it connects on a diagonal. Next up, we're going to have a block floating above this section here. So I'm going to be building up 3 high with my temporary blocks like this. Then I'm going to be adding in a couple extra off to the side so I can place in a trapdoor, and I'm going to add my wood on top of that trapdoor. Let's remove all of these temporary blocks. While I'm on this side, let's add in a few trapdoors. I'm going to have a trapdoor coming towards the front. I'll add in an extra log and then a trapdoor off to this side, just like this. I'm going to have a trapdoor here and here. And then I'm going to have one around on the back side of this section as well. I'm also going to be placing a trapdoor on top of this log, and you can see how it makes this section of the stem look more connected. Coming diagonally down from here, I'm going to add a trapdoor onto the center of this group of 3, and diagonally down off to the other side as well, and I'm going to add a log coming backwards like this. On to pumpkin number 2. Let's come back to this next ladder over here. I'm going to start by placing an orange concrete right behind where the ladder is, and then I'm going to add a trapdoor on top of that. Now we need to create the circle for the base of the pumpkin. So diagonally back from that first concrete, I'm going to add a concrete. Then we'll have 2 wool and 2 concrete. Coming diagonally in, I'll have a concrete and a wool. Then I'll have a wool and a concrete. And then I'm going to repeat this pattern going around. So we're going to have concrete, wool, wool, concrete, concrete. Then we'll have concrete on the corner, wool, then diagonally another wool and a concrete. And again, we'll follow along with a concrete, 2 wool, 2 concrete, and then we'll have our corner with a concrete and a wool and a concrete. On to the last side. And our last section of the corner. And we just need to place 1 last wool in to complete that pattern. We're going to be creating the same chevron pattern with the stripped dark oak logs in this pumpkin like we have over in our smaller pumpkin. So I'm going to start by placing in my first group of chevrons and continuing on from there. Once again, you could swap out this flooring for whatever your preferred flooring style is, and you could have some fun and create a pumpkin style flooring if you'd like to really enhance that pumpkin-y feel. If you create this adorable Pumpkin Patch Cottage, be sure to join my Discord server and share some pictures. I would love to see how it looks in your world. Just need to fill in this side now. And here's how this chevron pattern will look. Now that we've got the base of our pumpkin, we can start curving up on either side, and we're going to be using a fair few temporary blocks, so make sure you have those ready to go. I'm using purple wool, but you can use whatever supply you have lots of, so if you're in survival, dirt is a great option. I'm going to start by placing a temporary block in the center of a 5 wide side, and then I'm going to place two wool and then 1 concrete off to the left hand side. And I can go ahead and do this on each of the faces. This pumpkin is symmetrical going around. Now we need to start connecting these. So coming back to our first one where we've got these 2 wool, I'm going to come back and add in 2 concrete. Then I'll have 2 wool and a concrete in this corner, and you can see we're curving back towards this way, so I'm going to finish off with 2 more concrete. Let's follow along again, so 2 concrete, 2 wool, and then we've got 3 more concrete just to fill in that gap. And here's how it should look from above. For the next layer, I'm going to begin by adding in my 4 2-high orange stained glass windows, and these are going in the center of each of these 3 wide sections of wall. Now that that's in, we can add in this next layer. I'm going to start coming towards the right hand side of my first window. I'm going to start with a wool, then a concrete, then a concrete, then a wool. In the very corner, I'll add in a concrete powder. Next, I'm going to place a concrete on top of this concrete block here and a wool to connect up to this orange concrete powder. Then I'm going to add in a concrete powder beside the window and then a concrete onto that like this. Now we need to repeat this pattern. So we're going to have wool, concrete, concrete, wool. Then we've got our concrete powder. I'm going to add a concrete on top of here and a wool on top of here, then a concrete powder and a concrete. And repeat. So whereas this pumpkin here was symmetrical across the diagonal, this pumpkin here is symmetrical all the way around, so each corner is the same but rotated. Okay, so next we've got wool, concrete, concrete, wool. Once you get into the pattern, it makes things a lot easier for building. And remember that since a pumpkin is a natural object, if your pumpkin has slightly different shading, it's totally okay. And it even is okay if it ends up not being perfectly symmetrical in terms of whether it's spherical or not. You want to have a fairly spherical shape, but if it's not quite perfect, it's okay. So there is that layer complete, and we can continue up. Our next layer is just going to sit right on top of this last layer we've created, so we don't need to expand out any further for the shape of our pumpkin. I'm going to start with 2 wool beside this window, then we'll have 2 concrete, a wool, and a concrete powder, and then we'll finish with 3 more concrete, and we'll repeat. 2 wool, 2 concrete, wool, concrete powder, 3 concrete. Now that the basic layer is complete, we're going to be using a few spruce trapdoors because we're going to start curving in from here, so we need a little bit more room to build. So I'm going to be adding one on either side of the 5 wide sections like this, making sure that when you click them, they flip downwards. And I'm also going to be adding 2 into each of these corner sections. So when we look from above, it's going to look like this. Let's continue on starting above this window. I'm going to start with a concrete powder above the window and then off to this right hand side. Then placing on top of this trapdoor, I'm going to add in 2 concrete. Then I'm going to have a wool, a concrete powder in the corner. Then I'm going to have a concrete on top of this trapdoor. Coming around, I'm going to be placing 2 more concrete, leaving this corner gap free. You can see that I've got a corner gap on either side of this L-shaped piece. And then we're going to come back over the window with a concrete, and 2 concrete powder. And now we can repeat. So next up, we're going to have our 2 concrete, wool, concrete powder, concrete. Coming around, we're going to have 2 more concrete on here, 1 coming diagonally out, and back to our concrete powder. This layer has a lot more concrete powder and concrete than wool. There we go. Now we need to add in all of our spruce trapdoors to get ready for the next layer. These are going to go all the way around the outline, leaving out the gap above our doorway. You can see I'm placing them onto each of these blocks, all the way around the corners, except for these gaps above the windows. So it'll look like this from above. For this next layer, I'm going to start with an orange concrete and place it on top of this orange concrete off to the left-hand side of one of these sort of pumpkin faces. Then I'll add in 2 wool and then a orange concrete powder and a concrete on the other side as well. So we've got a 5 wide section here. Let's do this on each of the faces. Now we need to connect up the corners. I'm going to start at this single concrete beside the concrete powder, and I'm going to place 2 concrete coming back, then 2 wool off of that, so 2 off to the side, 2 going back. Then I'm going to add in 2 of my concrete powder followed by a concrete. Let's do that again. So we've got 2 concrete, 2 wool, 2 concrete powder and 1 concrete. There we go. Now that we've got that placed in, let's grab some more of these spruce trapdoors and we're going to go all the way around this outline. Then I'm going to add 3 extra in each of these gaps. And 1 into each of the corners. You should end up with a sort of rounded off square shape. Before we add in the next layer, I'm going to grab a couple of temporary blocks and build 2 in from the center of each of these 5 wide sections of trapdoor. I'm then going to place in a spruce trapdoor off of that, creating a little kind of X in the center. Let's remove all of those and leave that floating there just like that. Okay, on to the next layer. For this layer, I'm going to grab out my orange concrete and I'm going to start on top of this concrete here in between the concrete block and the concrete powder. And I'm going to build back in a little L shape. Then I'll grab some wool and build back in a little L shape and then add in 2 more concrete beside that. And in these 2 gaps, I'll add in concrete powder. Let's do this on each of the flat faces. Now I need to connect up these corners. I'm going to start in the corner when I'm working backwards from this front first L that we've created by placing in a concrete powder, and then I'm going to use wool and place it in sort of an upside down L. Then when I rotate around from this side, I'm going to be doing the same thing. So I've got a concrete powder beside this concrete powder and then an upside down L in my orange wool. There we go. Now on top of these floating trapdoors in the center, I'm just going to place in a little plus symbol with my orange wool, just like that. And I'm going to fill in the whole rest of this layer with some of my spruce trapdoors. We're on to the last layer of the orange for this large pumpkin. I'm going to start by placing in 5 of these oak wood blocks where we've got the texture on all sides on top of that last orange plush shape we created. Then I'm going to grab some concrete powder and I'm going to place them in little L shapes like this. Next up, I'm going to grab some orange concrete and I'll place them in some little T shapes, filling in from the center. We've almost completely filled in now, so I'm going to grab a bit more of this orange concrete powder and I'm just going to place them off to a diagonal on each of these sides. So I've got one on this side, I'm going to rotate and do the same thing, rotate and do the same thing over here, and rotate and do that one more time, and then I'll fill in the rest with some of my orange wool. And here's how this pumpkin is looking, but it does need a stalk. To add in the stalk, I'm going to start with my oak wood and build up 3 high in the center of this plus. Then coming forwards to the left and to the back, I'll add in 1 extra log and then 2 off to the right hand side. I'm going to add a stair on top of this log off to the left and a slab on top of this log to the right, as well as one on top of the center block here. I'm going to add a slab on the back block as well, and then I'm going to use a couple temporary blocks to add a log coming forward like this. And I'm going to add a slab on top of that, and then I'm going to add a block coming diagonally back and up as well, and a slab on top of that. Let's remove all of these, and we're going to add in some trapdoors now. I'm going to begin with a spruce trapdoor in front of here and off to this side, and I'm also going to add one underneath this log. I'm going to begin to rotate around now. I'm going to add a trapdoor up on top here. Coming around to this side, I'm going to add one behind this log and one down here as well. Doesn't that stalk look great? And they're really looking like pumpkins now. It's time to start adding some details. I'm going to come down to where I've got my door on this smaller pumpkin, and I can go ahead and remove that, and I'm going to add in a waxed copper door with its beautiful orange color. Let's add in a door decoration, starting with some planks, a stair, and then 2 dark oak slabs. Then for an archway of the door, I'm going to use a couple of these grindstones, followed by some fences, and let's create an arch with a slab and 2 stairs. Just like that. Now let's head on inside, and I'm going to be placing some waxed copper trapdoors behind each of the windows. And I'm going to hang a lantern in here as well. We can use our nifty little basement tunnel to head on over inside the larger pumpkin. Up we go. Hello pumpkin, and I'm going to hang a lantern in the center as well as above each of the windows. And while I'm in here, I'm going to add these trapdoors to these windows as well. They give the appearance of a LED light window. There we go. Let's head back through our basement, and you can see just how spacious this pumpkin build really is. You can absolutely extend the basement as well if you need more space and survival. And coming back out, and you can see the LED-like look it achieves. Now these windows could use a bit more decoration. I'm going to start by removing any temporary blocks that are left over from building. And then each of the windows on this build is going to get decorated with 3 slabs across the bottom. Then I'll use a slab at the top with 2 stairs to create an archway like this. I'll add a pot so I can add in some greenery, and then I'm using these brown window shutter banners on either side. If you don't have access to banner making supplies, you could use some oak trapdoors here. So I'm going to use this design on all of the windows on the large pumpkin, as well as the 3 windows over on the smaller pumpkin. All of my windows are adorned, so let's add in a couple of chimneys. I'm going to start with a chimney on the smallest pumpkin, and I'm coming to where this left side window is. I'm going to come up so I'm at this layer where it's 5 blocks across. And on top of this concrete here, I'm going to place in a dark oak stair facing like this, and then a stair upside down facing outwards. Then I'll add in a spruce log, and I'm going to place dark oak signs on 2 sides like this. Then I'll use a couple more stairs, place in another spruce log with a sign towards the back, and then I can add in my campfire and surround with a couple dark oak trapdoors. Now we need to add a chimney to this larger pumpkin, and it has a slightly more complicated shape. I'm going to come to this concrete section over here, and I'm going to start with a dark oak stair and placing it on top of this wall with a stair upside down facing in towards the concrete. On top of here is where I'm going to add in 2 spruce logs going up, and then I'm going to have a stair coming off on either side like this. Now on the stair that's facing towards the front of the pumpkins, I'm going to add in a trapdoor flipped up like this. And then if we look at this side where we can see these 2 logs, I'll have a trapdoor at the top and then a sign underneath that, and a sign diagonally up at the back of the chimney. Now we need to come up and out at an angle. I'm going to start by placing a stair facing towards the right hand side of the pumpkin like this. So I'm looking from the back of the pumpkin right now. Looking at the back of the stair, I'm going to place in an upside down stair this way and an upside down stair that way, and then a right way up stair on top of that one. Then I'm going to have 2 logs coming up on top of this stair. And this is where I'm going to add my campfire and surround with some trapdoors. Almost there, and there we go. To finish the design off, we need to add a few more of these trapdoors and signs. So I've got a trapdoor here, followed by a sign coming towards the front, and then a sign at the back just above that stair. Let's have a look at these 2 chimneys. Next, to add to that pumpkin patch feel, we need to add some vines weaving in and out between our pumpkins. Let's start with a vine coming out from underneath this large pumpkin. So I'm going to come to this concrete section, and I'll be using green wool for this. And I'm going to place 2 green wool coming across this way. Then I'm going to place 2 temporary blocks on an angle and add wool on top of that and coming down. Then I need 1 more temporary block so I can come up on an angle. Let's add another little vine kind of in between these 2 pumpkins. So I'm going to turn around so I'm looking at this gap from behind. And I'm going to come to where I've got this group of concrete here. I'm going to place 2 of my green wool out from underneath like this. Then on a diagonal, I'm going to place in 2 temporary blocks to build up higher like this. And I can remove those and place 2 more on the ground level at an angle. Turning back around so we're looking from the front, we're going to have a vine curving kind of in front of the pumpkin patch, and these vines almost form a sort of fence around our pumpkin patch house. I'm going to start by placing a wool underneath this group of 2 wool where we've got one of the wools going towards the back, and then I'll come up on an angle and down on another angle like this. I'm going to place another block in here and jump up 1, then I'll come across 2, and I can remove these temporary blocks. I'm going to be adding in another block on an angle here, so I'm going to build up and add 1 back above this farmland. And then I'm going to come down again here. To do this, we'll need to place it on top of the farmland, and that's okay, we've got plenty of other space to place in the pumpkins. But I am going to flick back up over the top of this here farmland, and I can remove that temporary block. You can see the sort of fence-like shape I'm talking about. Next up, let's come back around to behind this smaller pumpkin. I'm going to start by placing in a wool in front or kind of behind, depending on where you look at it, from this orange wool. Then I'm going to come up with 2 blocks on an angle this way. Then I'm going to come up another layer and we're going to go 2 blocks across this way. Next, we're coming down on an angle, so I'm going to use a temporary block, just building 1 more out like this. And then the next 2 are going to place on top of this farmland and across the top of this trapdoor that we've got here. Next, I want to angle up on a diagonal coming towards this podzol. Let's remove these temporary blocks. There we go, curving over like that. For our last woolen vine, I'm going to come over to the corner of this pumpkin and place a wool under here. Then I'm going to come forward for 2 blocks like this. And I'm going to come up 2 more blocks here. I'm going to come back down at an angle for 1 block, and then I'm going to place 1 more on top of this farmland. Alright, I'm just adding on the last of the finishing touches now, and that includes a vine draping down of the side of this pumpkin. There we go. You can see I have a couple coming out at the top of each of my pumpkins. And I've used azalea leaves because I like their lush green colour, but you can use whichever leaves you have on hand. I've also used some of these leaves around the bases of the pumpkins, especially where I've got these woolly vines sticking out here and over here. And if we come around to the back, you can see they add a lush feel to these pumpkin patch. Now where I've got all of my farmland, I've added in the rest of my pumpkin patch as well. So I've grown some pumpkins, I've placed in some jack-o'-lanterns, I've added in some wheat here and there just to break up the dirt colour on the ground. And then I've created these miniature pumpkins using a carved pumpkin head. And to do this, it's placed on top of a bed on an armor stand and it just sticks the right height out of the ground. Don't they look so cute? I placed them here and there throughout the build, including a little carved pumpkin by the door. Let's check out some other ways I've decorated my Pumpkin Patch Cottage. Because pumpkins are so perfect for fall, I've placed in some of these custom fall trees with their wonderful orange, red and yellow colours. I've used carpet to create the look of some fallen leaves on the ground, and then I've continued this warm colour palette with little patches of wheat here and there. I've kept things warm with the path as well, using a mixture of dirt, and I've added in some lighting on some rustic fences. I placed in some other rustic farms yard decor with a little seating area here, a wheelbarrow, a well, and a scarecrow. And then for my planting, around the outside of the pumpkins, I've used mostly yellow, white, and greenery. And then for my pot plants on my pumpkins, I've used green as well. And then I've used some of these wither roses because they have a really spooky autumn feel. And then I've got some of these orange tulips as well. If you'd like some more decor ideas, be sure to check out the link to the decoration tutorials in the description below. And if you'd like to expand this pumpkin patch to create an entire pumpkin village, be sure to check out all my other pumpkin tutorials. So now you have an adorable pumpkin patch cottage. If you enjoyed creating today's build, I'd really appreciate it if you consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in another video.